kids. Mr. Ask.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues Madeline Dean and Ted Lieu will now detail former President Trump's increasingly desperate attempts to stop the steal.
Mr. President, esteemed members of the Senate, it is my solemn honor to be before you today. I am Madeline Dean, Congresswoman from the 4th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. I'm a lawyer. I'm a former professor of writing. I'm a sister. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother to 3 with 4th on her way. I'm a person of faith. And I'm an American. Along with Manager Lieu, I will present the actions of a desperate president. And we will present evidence today of a class of public servants who, standing up to enormous pressure from the President of the United States, did the right thing and upheld their oaths. My colleagues just presented evidence of a President Trump's months-long efforts to incite his base, leading them to believe the election was stolen, that they needed to fight like hell to stop the steal on January the 6th. These weren't President Trump's only efforts to overturn the results. Manager Lieu and I will present evidence of President Trump's relentless, escalating campaigns to fabricate an election victory by ignoring adverse court rulings, pressuring and threatening election officials, attacking senators and members of Congress, pressuring the Justice Department, and finally bullying his own vice president. President Trump and his allies filed 62 separate lawsuits in federal courts across more than half a dozen states and the District of Columbia, including Pennsylvania, my home state, as well as Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Of the 62 post-election legal challenges, he lost 61. Only one was successful, and that case involved ballot curing in Pennsylvania and had no impact on President Biden's 80,555 vote victory in our Commonwealth. To be clear, not a single court, not a single judge agreed that the election results were invalid or should be invalidated. Instead, court after court reviewing these challenges said these cases were, quote, not credible, without merit, based on nothing but speculation, and flat out wrong. The judiciary resoundingly rejected Trump's fraud allegations and upheld the election results. But it was more than that. The courts said these cases were different. They were dangerous to our democracy. For an example, in an opinion by United States District Court Judge Matthew Brann from Pennsylvania, he said, and I quote, "This court has been presented with strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations. In the United States of America, this cannot justify the disenfranchisement of a single voter, let alone all the voters of its 6th most populated state. Our people and laws and institutions demand more. Because this court has no authority to take away the right to vote of even a single person, let alone millions of citizens, it cannot grant plaintiffs' requested relief." That decision by Judge Braun was affirmed on appeal by Judge Stephanos Bibas, a Trump appointee who agreed and wrote, and I quote, "The campaign's claims have no merit. The number of ballots it specifically challenges is far smaller than the roughly 81,000 vote margin of victory. And it never claims fraud or that any of the votes were cast by illegal voters. Plus, tossing out millions of mail-in ballots would be drastic and unprecedented, disenfranchising a huge swath of the electorate and upsetting all down-ballot races, end quote. Similarly, as Judge Linda Parker of the Eastern District of Michigan framed it, she said, "Stunning in its scope and breathtaking in its reach. If granted, the relief would disenfranchise the votes of more than 5.5 million Michigan citizens who, with dignity and hope and a promise of a vote, participated in the 2020 general election." Donald Trump told his supporters, "They are stealing the election. They took away your vote. It's rigged." That was not true. According to judge after judge, the truth was exactly the opposite. Trump was not suing to ensure election integrity. He was pursuing lawsuits that would, in effect, strip away American votes so that he could win. In other words, Donald Trump was asking the judiciary to take away votes from Americans so that he could steal the election for himself. Then, after losing in all the courts, Trump turned to another tactic, pressuring and threatening election officials. You saw what happened in Michigan after Trump attacked the state and its election officials. His supporters surrounded the Secretary of State's home, as you saw in the earlier slide, chanting, calling her a felon. On November 17th, the Board of Canvassers for Wayne County, Michigan, home to Detroit, unanimously certified the election results for Biden. That same night, after their vote to certify the results, Trump called the two Republican members of that board, pressuring them to change their minds. The call worked. The next day, both Monica Palmer and William Hartman, the Republican board members, attempted to rescind their vote to certify Michigan's election results, but they simply couldn't. President Trump didn't stop there. He then contacted Majority Leader of the Michigan Senate, Mike Shirkey, and the Speaker of the Michigan House, Lee Chatfield, to lobby them to overturn Michigan's results. Trump invited Mr. Chatfield and Mr. Shirkey to Washington to meet with him at the White House, where the president lobbied them further. Let's be clear. Donald Trump was calling officials, hosting them at the White House, urging them to defy the voters in their state and instead award votes to Trump. The officials held strong, and so Trump moved on to a different state, my home state of Pennsylvania. I am certain my senators, Casey and Senator Toomey, remember what happened there. In early December, as he did in Michigan, he began calling election officials, including my former colleagues in the Pennsylvania legislature, Republicans, Majority Leader Kim Ward and Speaker of the House Brian Cutler. Majority Leader Ward said the president called her to, quote, declare there was a fraud in the voting, end quote. Then on November 25th, President Trump phoned into a Republican state Senate policy hearing trying to convince the Republican legislators, senators, and House members there had been a fraud in the vote. He even had his lawyer hold a phone up to the microphone in that hearing room so the committee could hear him. Here is what he said.
We can't let that happen. We can't let it happen for our country. And this election has to be turned around because we won Pennsylvania by a lot and we won all of these swing states by a lot.
This was a gathering. I've attended many, I have to tell you, as a former state legislator, a lot of policy hearings. I have to say with some confidence that was likely the first time a president of the United States of America called into a state legislative policy hearing. And remember, here is the president saying he won Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania had been certified that Biden had won by more than 80,000 votes. Less than a week after calling into that meeting, he invited multiple Republican members of the Pennsylvania legislature to the White House, the same scheme he had used on the Michigan legislators. It didn't work with those public servants either. Think about it. the President of the United States was calling public officials, calling from the White House, inviting them into the Oval Office, telling them to disenfranchise voters of their state, telling them to overturn the will of the American people. Also, he could take the election for himself. And then in Georgia, a state Trump had counted on for victory, his conduct was perhaps the most egregious. On November 11th, Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger confirmed that he believed ballots were accurately counted for Biden. Trump went on a relentless attack. Here are just a few examples. In all, Trump tweeted at Raffensperger 17 times in the coming week. I'll show you just a few. Calling him a disaster, obstinate, not having a clue, being played for a fool, and being a so-called Republican. All because Raffensperger was doing his job, ensuring the integrity of our elections. And these attacks had consequences. Mr. Raffensperger and his family received death threats. Quote, "Your husband deserves to face a firing squad. You better not botch this recount. Your life depends upon it." The Raffenspergers should be put on trial for treason and face execution. Just some of the threats they received. After these death threats, on November 25th, Mr. Raffensperger wrote an op-ed where he said, "My family voted for Trump, donated to him, and are now being thrown under the bus by him." But he also noted, "Elections are the bedrock of our democracy. They need to be run fairly and, perhaps more importantly, impartially. That's not partisan. That's just American." It's important to remember that this wasn't just a random attack. Trump wasn't just criticizing a politician over policy. We're saying he didn't agree. Donald Trump was savagely attacking a Secretary of State because the official did his job and certified the state according to how the people in that state voted. Donald Trump was trying to undermine our elections by taking votes away from the American people so that he could remain president. And he was willing to blame and betray anyone, even his own supporters, if they got in the way. Remember, senators, those threats were to Mr. Raffensperger's family. So some may say Trump didn't know his attacks against Mr. Raffensperger would result in death threats, except that all of this was very public. The secretary published his op-ed in USA Today, and major networks, including Fox, covered the threats against the Raffensperger. What did Trump do? Did he stop? Did he say, no, supporters, that isn't what I meant? No, he doubled down. Let's see the evidence.
This was a massive fraud. This should never take place in this country. We're like a third world country. Look at Georgia. But I understand the Secretary of State, who is really, he's an enemy of the people. The Secretary of State, and whether he's Republican or not, this man, what he's done.
Like this character in Georgia who's a disaster.
Let that sink in. A Republican public servant doing his job, whose family had just received death threats, and the President of the United States labeled him an enemy of the people. And that's why this is different, because this was not just one attack or one comment. This was attack after attack in the face of clear threats of violence. And on December 1st, another official, Gabriel Sterling, a Republican who voted for Trump, made this point and appealed directly to our president to stop his dangerous conduct.
Mr. President, it looks like you likely lost the state of Georgia. We're investigating. There's always a possibility. I get it. And you have the rights to go through the courts. What you don't have the ability to do, and you need to step up and say this, is stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed.
Mr. Sterling put this perfectly. In this country, we can appropriately challenge a close count. or go to the courts or disagree with others or make bold statements. But what Trump was doing was different. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed. Mr. Sterling saw what Trump's conduct was fomenting. He warned him on live TV that violence was already happening and that more violence was foreseeable and inevitable. Sterling's pleas were played over and over on every network. Rather than heed that warning, Trump escalated again. In early December, Trump called Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, and pressured him to hold a special session of the state legislature to overturn the election results and to appoint electors who would vote for Trump. A few weeks later, on December 23rd, Trump called the chief investigator for the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, who was conducting an audit of the signature matching procedures for absentee ballots. Trump urged him, find the fraud, and claimed the official would be a national hero if he did. Let's call this what it is. He was asking the official to say there was evidence of fraud when there wasn't any. The official refused, and the investigation was completed. And on December 29th, Raffensperger announced that the audit found, quote, no fraudulent absentee ballots with a 99% confidence level. On January 3rd, Trump tweeted about a call he had with a Georgia election official the day before. He said, and I quote, I spoke to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger yesterday about Fulton County and voter fraud in Georgia. He was unwilling or unable to answer questions such as the ballots under the table scam, ballot destruction, out-of-state voters, dead voters, and more. He has no clue. On January the 5th, the Washington Post released a recording of that call, which had occurred on January 2nd. Remember, just 4 days before the attack on the Capitol. Here is what President Trump said.
It's more illegal for you than it is for them, because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense. And you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to Ryan, your lawyer. That's a big risk.
Let's be clear. This is the President of the United States telling a Secretary of State that if he does not find votes, he will face criminal penalties.
That's not at all what he just said.
Donald Trump was asking the Secretary of State to somehow find the exact number of votes Donald Trump lost the state by. Remember, President Biden won Georgia by 11,779 votes. In his own words, Trump said, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes. He wanted the Secretary of State to somehow find the precise number plus one so that he could win. Here's what he said.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
He says it right there. The President of the United States telling a public official to manufacture the exact votes needed so he can win. Senators, we must not become numb to this. Trump did this across state after state, so often, so loudly, so publicly. Public officials like you and me receive death threats and calls threatening criminal penalties, all because Trump wanted to remain in power. These public officials exercised great political and personal courage in the face of unprecedented pressure from a President of the United States. Senators, ours is a dialogue with history, a conversation with the past, with a hope for the future. Senators, I thank you today for your kind attention.
Nothing like taking things out of context so you can push your narrative. I can't wait till the other side speaks, because the other side uses facts. And they might play the whole phone call. They might read out the whole tweet. They might, let you see the whole event instead of just little parts and pieces to push a narrative. These guys are clowns.
My colleague, Congresswoman Dean, went through President Trump's efforts to overturn the election through the courts, and when that started failing, his deeply disturbing attacks on state and local officials. I'm going to walk through President Trump's extraordinary efforts remaining until January 6th, when he tried again to overturn the election. I first want to highlight Representative Raskin's question to all of you today. Is this America? Like all of you, I love this country. I am an immigrant. My parents came to Ohio, and we started off living in the basement of a person's home. We were poor, and they went to flea markets to sell gifts to make ends meet. Over many years, they built a small business, opened 6 gift stores, and achieved the American dream. It's one reason I joined the United States Air Force on active duty. I believe America is an exceptional country. I was trained as a prosecutor at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, and I remain in the reserves because we're the greatest country in the world. But how did our exceptional country get to the point where a violent mob attacked our Capitol, murdering a police officer, assaulting over 140 other officers? How do we get to the point where rioters desecrated, defiled, and dishonored your Senate chamber, where the very place in which you sit became a crime scene, and where National Guard troops still patrol outside wearing body armor? I'll show you how we got here. President Donald J. Trump ran out of nonviolent options to maintain power. After his efforts in the courts and threatening officials failed, he turned to privately and publicly attacking members of his own party in the House and in the Senate. He would publicly bait senators, naming them in social media. For example, on December 18th, President Trump named at Senate Majority Leader and Republican senators, telling them they have to get tougher or they won't have a Republican Party anymore. We won the presidential election by a lot. Fight for it. Don't let them take it away. President Trump was suggesting to members of this Senate that if they didn't help him try to overturn the election, there would be consequences. On December 24th, President Trump wrote, "I saved at least 8 Republican senators, including Mitch, from losing in the last rigged for-president election. Now they almost all sit back and watch me fight against a crooked and vicious foe, the radical left Democrats. I will," and in all capital letters he wrote, "never forget!" President Trump was telling you that you owe him, that if you don't help him fight to overturn the results, he will never forget, and that there will be consequences. These are threats, just like the threats he made to state and local officials. And it continued. On December 29th, President Trump tweeted, "Can you imagine if the Republicans stole a presidential election from the Democrats? All hell would break out. Republican leadership only wants the path of least resistance. Our leaders, not me, of course, are pathetic. They only know how to lose. P.S. I got many senators and congressmen and congresswomen elected. I do believe they forgot." President Trump targeted senators and members of Congress on social media, calling them pathetic for letting the election get, quote, stolen from them. On January 4th, 2 days before the attack, President Trump tweeted, "The surrender caucus within the Republican Party will go down in infamy as weak and ineffective guardians of our nation, who are willing to accept the certification of fraudulent presidential numbers." Now he's mocking some Republican members as the surrender caucus, calling them weak and ineffective guardians of our nation because they would not pretend that he had won when in fact he had not. And then, the very day before the attack, President Trump's threats grew even more heated and specific towards Republicans that he considered to be part of that surrender caucus. Now, we've shown you this tweet before, but I want to draw your attention to how the president was not just inciting his base, but how he was also calling out specific Senate Republicans at the end of this tweet. This is a specific warning to anyone who won't help him overturn the results. Anyone who was against the president became an enemy. And let me be very clear. The president wasn't just coming for one or two people or Democrats like me. He was coming for you, for Democratic and Republican senators. He was coming for all of us, just as the mob did at his direction. In addition to going after senators and members of Congress, President Trump also pressured our Justice Department to investigate the false claims that the election was stolen. At the President's direction, Attorney General William Barr, a loyal member of the President's cabinet, authorized federal prosecutors to pursue substantial allegations of voting and vote tabulation irregularities. Bill Barr pursuing these allegations sparked an outcry. 16 assistant U.S. attorneys in the Trump administration urged the Attorney General to cease investigations because they had not seen evidence of any substantial anomalies. That means they did not find any evidence of real fraud. Attorney General Barr pursued the investigations anyways, and after his investigation, this is what he found, quote, "We have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election." 2 weeks later, on December 14th, the electors voted to give Joe Biden 306 electoral votes and ensured his victory. The following day, Bill Barr resigned. Attorney General Barr had loyally served President Trump. He had never publicly come out against the president, but for Bill Barr, making up election fraud claims and saying the election was stolen was a bridge too far. Bill Barr made clear that attempting to overturn election results crossed a line. According to a news report, Bill Barr, the highest law enforcement official in the land, told President Donald Trump to his face that his theories of election fraud were, quote, bullshit, unquote. When Bill Barr resigned, his former deputy, Jeff Rosen, took his place. President Trump initially tweeted about Mr. Rosen that he was an outstanding person when he announced that he would become acting Attorney General. But when Rosen took over, President Trump put the same pressure on him that he had done with state officials, members of Congress, U.S. senators, and his former Attorney General. President Trump reportedly summoned acting Attorney General Rosen to the Oval Office the next day and pressured Rosen to appoint special counsels to keep investigating the election, including unfounded accusations of widespread voter fraud, and also to investigate Dominion, the voting machines firm. According to reports, Mr. Rosen refused. He maintained that he would make decisions based on the facts and the law, and reminded President Trump what he had already been told by Attorney General Bill Barr, that the department had already investigated and, quote, found no evidence of widespread fraud. But President Trump refused to follow the facts and the law, so the president turned to someone he knew would do his bidding. He turned to Jeffrey Clark, another Justice Department lawyer, who had allegedly expressed support for using the Department of Justice to investigate the election results. Shortly after Acting Attorney General Rosen followed his duty and the law to refuse to reopen investigations, President Trump intended to replace Mr. Rosen with Mr. Clark, who could then try to stop Congress from certifying the Electoral College results. According to reports, White House counsel Pat Cipollone advised President Trump not to fire Acting Attorney General Rosen. Department officials had also threatened to resign en masse if he had fired Rosen. President Trump's actions, time and time again, made clear that he would do anything and pressure anyone if it meant overturning the election results. We watched President Trump use any means necessary to pursue this aim, feverishly grasping for straws at retaining his hold on the presidency. But all his efforts prior to January 6 kept failing. And finally, in his desperation, he turned on his own vice president. He pressured Mike Pence to violate his constitutional oath and to refuse to certify the oath. President Trump had decided that Vice President Pence who presided over the certification, could somehow stop it. As Pence will later confirm, the vice president does not have that power in the Constitution. And President Trump never tried to explain why he thought the vice president could block the certification of election results. He just began relentlessly attacking the vice president. Publicly, President Trump attacked Pence on social media and at rallies, getting his supporters to believe that Mike Pence could stop this certification on January 6th. Here's what President Trump said in Georgia on January 4th.
And I hope Mike Pence comes through for us, I have to tell you. I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much.
Behind closed doors, President Trump applied significant pressure to his second in command. Multiple reports confirm that President Trump used his personal attorneys and other officials to pressure the vice president. Trump reportedly told almost anyone who called him to also call the vice president. According to reports, when Mike Pence was in the Oval Office, President Trump would call people to try to get them to convince the vice president to help him. And President Trump kept repeating the myth that Pence could stop the certification to his base to anger them, hoping to intimidate Mike Pence. On the morning of the rally on January 6th, President Trump tweeted, "All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states," and in all caps he wrote, "and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage." President Trump later went on to attack Pence nearly a dozen times in his speech at the Save America March. Privately, in person, before Pence headed to oversee the joint session on January 6th, President Trump again threatened Pence. "You can either go down in history as a patriot," Mr. Trump told him, according to two people briefed on the conversation, "or you can go down in history as a pussy." As a veteran, I find it deeply dishonorable that our former president and commander-in-chief equated patriotism with violating the Constitution and overturning the election. You will see and hear the consequences of President Trump's repeated attacks on the vice president, the chance of traitor, and the chance of hanging Mike Pence. Thankfully, Vice President Pence stood his ground like our other brave officials stood their ground. He refused the president and fulfilled his duty on January 6th, even after the Capitol was attacked, even after he was personally targeted, even after his family was targeted. Vice President Pence stood strong and certified the election. Vice President Pence showed us what it means to be an American, what it means to show courage. He put his country, his oath, his values, and his morals above the will of one man. The president had tried everything in his power to seize everything in his attempt to seize power from the rightful victor of the election. President Trump's extraordinary actions grew increasingly more desperate. You saw him go from pursuing claims in the courts to threatening state and local election officials, to then attacking members of Congress and the Senate, to compromising our Justice Department, and then to attacking the Republican vice president. These brave public servants were being pressured by our commander-in-chief to overturn the results. Some of them and their families got death threats. Thankfully, at every turn, our democratic processes prevailed and the rule of law prevailed. It is only because all of these people stayed strong and refused President Trump that our republic held fast and the will of the electorate was seen through. And at this point, President Donald J. Trump ran out of nonviolent options to maintain power. I began today by raising the question of how we got here. What you saw was a man so desperate to cling to power that he tried everything he could to keep it. And when he ran out of nonviolent measures, he turned to the violent mob that attacked your Senate chamber on January 6th. As you cast your vote after this trial, I hope each of you will think of the bravery of all these people who said no to President Trump because they knew that this was not right, that this was not America.
Hey, thank you so much, Mumsy Bear, Andy, and Edward, for your donations and all your support. I really appreciate you.
In quite chilling detail, I should say, how President Trump was well aware of the threat of violence on January 6th and how he welcomed and amplified his supporters' plans for insurrection against the Union. I should say, as lead manager, this is a moment of special pride for me because Representative Plaskett is not only the first delegate ever to be on a team of impeachment managers in American history, but she was also my law student at American University's Washington College of Law. And I hope I'm not violating any federal educational records laws when I say she was an A student then and she's an A+ student now. Stacey Plaskett.
Thank you so much. Height. Mr. President, distinguished senators, I'm Stacey Plaskett, and I represent the people of the Virgin Islands of the United States. Over this past weekend, my 11-year-old daughter, I overheard her telling one of my sons, "Mommy doesn't seem really nervous about the impeachment trial." To which that son, sounding like an older brother, said, "Talia, you'll learn that most of the time, Mommy really seems to have it under control." Now, we know as parents, that's not always the case. But I've learned throughout my life that preparation and truth can carry you far, can allow you to speak truth to power. I've learned that as a young black girl growing up in the projects in Brooklyn, housing community on St. Croix, sent to the most unlikeliest of settings, and now as an adult woman representing an island territory speaking to the U.S. Senate. And because of truth, I am confident today speaking before you, because truth and facts are overwhelming that our president, the President of the United States, incited a mob to storm the Capitol to attempt to stop the certification of a presidential election.
This person is super strange looking. Super strange.
Clear evidence that President Trump incited a violent mob to storm our Capitol when he ran out of nonviolent means to stop the election. Once assembled, that mob, at the president's direction, erupted into the bloodiest attack on this Capitol since 1814. Some of you have said there's no way the president could have known how violent the mob would be. That is false, because the violence, it was foreseeable. I want to show you why this violence was foreseeable and why Donald Trump was different than any other politician just telling their fighters, their supporters, to fight for something. The violence that occurred on January 6th, like the attack itself, did not just appear. You'll see that Donald Trump knew the people he was inciting, he saw the violence that they were capable of, and he had a pattern and practice of praising and encouraging that violence, never ever condemning it. And you'll see that this violent attack was not planned in secret. The insurgents believed that they were doing the duty of their president. They were following his orders. And so they publicized it openly, loudly, proudly, exact blueprints of how the attack would be made. Law enforcement saw these postings and reported that these insurgents would violently attack the Capitol itself. This was not just a comment by an official to fight for a cause. This was months of cultivating a base of people who were violent, praising that violence, and then leading that violence, that rage, straight at our door. The point is this: by the time he called the cavalry of his thousands of supporters on January 6th, and an event he had invited them to, he had every reason to know that they were armed, that they were violent, and that they would actually fight. He knew who he was calling and the violence they were capable of. And he still gave that marching orders to go to the Capitol and, quote, fight like hell and stop the steal. Make no mistake, the violence was not just foreseeable to President Trump. The violence was what he deliberately encouraged. As early as September, Trump set the precedent that when asked to denounce violence, he would do the opposite and encourage it. Now, if the president had only said something once about fighting to stop the steal and violence erupted, there would be no way to know he intended to incite it or saw it coming. But just as the president spent months spreading his big lie of the election, he also spent months cultivating groups of people who, following his command, repeatedly engaged in real, dangerous violence. And when they did, when the violence erupted as a response to his calls to fight against the stolen election, he did not walk it back. He did not tell them no. He did the opposite. The opposite. He praised and encouraged the violence so that it would continue. He fanned the flame of violence, and it worked. You'll see this over time. These very groups and individuals whose violence the president praised helped lead the attack on January 6th. And that's how we know clearly that President Trump deliberately incited this, and how we know he saw it coming. There are many examples where the president engaged in this pattern, and I'm just going to walk you through a few of them. Let's start with the President Trump's incitement of the Proud Boys. Many of you have heard of this group, which since 2018 has been classified by the FBI as an extremist organization. Since that classification, the group has repeatedly engaged in serious acts of violence, including at pro-Trump rallies. In one such act, on September 7th, the Proud Boys attacked a man with a baseball bat and then punched him while he was down on the ground. On September 29th, during a presidential debate, President Trump was asked specifically if he was willing to condemn white supremacy and militia groups, if he was willing to tell them to stand down and stop the violence. Let's watch.
But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm willing
prepared
to do
specifically
that, but
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
Let's hear now the president's response.
Do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. You want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
white supremacists and white
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by
when asked to condemn the Proud Boys and white supremacists, what did our president say? He said, "Stand back and stand by." His message was heard loud and clear. The group adopted that phrase, "Stand back and stand by," as their official slogan. They created merchandise with their new slogan, which they wore proudly across their backs at Trump's rallies, and they followed the president's orders. You'll see more about this later in the trial, but you'll see in these photos, to the left, Dominic Pizzola, and to the right, William Pepe, two of the leaders of the group, heading to the Capitol on January 6th. They were later charged with working together to obstruct law enforcement. As we go through this evidence, I want you to keep in mind these words by President Trump when asked to condemn violence. Stand back and stand by, and see example after example of the kinds of people like the Proud Boys who he had standing by on January 6th. By October, as my colleagues Mr. Castro and Mr. Swalwell showed you, Donald Trump was escalating his big lie that the only way he could lose the election was if it was rigged. So, as Election Day neared, his supporters were frustrated and they were angry. They were prepared to ensure his victory by any means necessary. One of these violent acts was on October 30th, sometime after 12:30 p.m., a caravan of more than 50 trucks covered in pro-Trump campaign gear confronted and surrounded cars carrying Biden-Harris campaign workers and a Biden-Harris campaign bus as they were traveling down Interstate 35 from San Antonio to Austin. According to witnesses, this caravan repeatedly tried to force the bus you saw and you see in that video to slow down in the middle of the highway and then to run it off the road. What that video you just saw does not show is that the bus that they tried to run off the road was filled with young campaign staff, volunteers, supporters, surrogates, people. As the Trump supporters closed in on the bus, a large black pickup truck adorned with Trump flags suddenly and intentionally swerved and crashed into a car driven by a Biden-Harris volunteer. News of the event went viral on social media. The President of the United States, in a campaign, saw his own supporters trying to run a bus carrying his opponent's campaign workers off the highway, to physically intimidate people in this country campaigning. Here was his response the next day.
3, 2, 1, go! Welcome to the...
They're gonna give me a copyright strike. So what?
The President of the United States tweeted a video of his supporters trying to drive a bus off the road. You'll recall in that first video that I showed you, there was no sound. Well, the one that he tweeted had a fight theme song placed to it that the president put that music to that video. And he added at the top, "I love Texas." By the next evening, that tweet that he did had been viewed 12.6 million times. And it wasn't just a tweet. On November 1st, at a Michigan rally with a sea of supporters, the president talked about that incident again. Here it is.
Do you see the way our people, they were protecting his bus yesterday?
Because they're nuts. So it's bus. They had hundreds of cars. Trump, and the American flag. That's it. You see Trump and American flag.
The president made a public joke of violence against campaigners in an American election. He made light of it. This was not a joke. In fact, it was so violent, it put so many people in harm's way that the FBI investigated the incident and the criminal responsibility of those who attacked these campaign workers. Now, our President Donald Trump could have said, okay, I didn't realize how bad that was. This was very violent. Please stop. But he didn't. He saw the investigation and made a statement in defense of his supporters' attack on the bus, writing, quote, "In my opinion, these patriots did nothing wrong. Engaging in violence for him made them patriots to Donald Trump." For anyone who says Donald Trump didn't know the violence he was inciting, I ask you to consider his supporters tried to drive a bus off the highway in the middle of the day to intimidate his opponent's campaign workers. And his response was to tweet the video of the incident that had fight music, joke about it, and call those individuals in that incident patriots. And once again, Donald Trump's praise worked to incite them further. Emboldened by that praise, they remained ready to fight, ready to stand back and stand by. This link is not hypothetical. Just like we saw with the Proud Boys showing up in full force on January 6th, Donald Trump's encouragement of this attack made sure his supporters were ready for the next one. The caravan bus attack had been organized by a Trump supporter named Keith Lee. Leading up to the attack on our Capitol of January 6th, Mr. Lee teamed up with other supporters to fundraise to help to bring people to Washington, D.C. for that day. The morning of the attack, he filmed footage of the Capitol, pointed out the flimsiness of fencing, and then addressed his supporters before the attack saying, quote, "As soon as you all get done hearing the president, y'all get to the Capitol. We need to surround this place." During the attack, he used a bullhorn to call out for the mob to rush in. He later went to the rotunda himself and then back outside to urge the crowd to come inside. These are the people that President Trump cultivated, who were standing by. I'd like to look at another example. After the election on December 12th, Trump supporters gathered en masse to protest the stolen election in D.C. It was billed by his loyalists as the second Million MAGA March. The rally was organized by Women for America First. The same group that you'll see later secured the permit for the January 6th rally. And who else was there? The Proud Boys, standing by.
Antifa was there too.
Attend that rally, but he made sure to make clear his supporters throughout the day how he felt about the event. At 8:47 a.m., he sent out a tweet. "We have just begun to fight." And then the rally began. And Donald Trump's allies, who spoke at the rally, carried on his message of the stolen election and the importance of fighting to stop the steal. Here's Nicholas Fuentes, a commentator who had organized a Stop the Steal rally in Michigan with Trump supporters.
In the first Million MAGA March, we promised that if the GOP would not do everything in their power to keep Trump in office, then we would destroy the GOP. And as we gather here in Washington, D.C. for a second Million MAGA March, we're done making promises. It has
those words, that was Trump's message. Destroy anyone who won't listen, who won't help them take the election for Trump. And as you will see, this was just the preview for Fuentes, who, like the Proud Boys and the Trump caravan organizers, would later heed the president's call and come to Washington and be there on January 6th. Later in the rally, a former Trump campaign spokeswoman, Katrina Pearson, also spoke. During her speech, she stated, quote, "This isn't over. This is just beginning," referring to the fight to stop the steal. And then she added, "We knew both Republican and Democrats were against we the people. We are the cavalry. No one's coming for us." It's clear that Trump and some of his supporters saw this as war, a fight against anyone who was unwilling to do whatever it took to keep Donald Trump in power. We are the cavalry. And President Trump continued to reinforce his support of these messages throughout the day. At 1:48 p.m., after both speeches, he retweeted his Deputy Chief of Staff's tweet showing his crowd that he had flown over on Marine One, and he tweeted, quote, "Thank you, Patriots." These people were, as you can see, gathered en masse and being told by the president's allies that their election had been stolen. And they were told they were the cavalry. No one else could do it. And after hearing these speeches and seeing the president's support, this is what Donald Trump's cavalry was capable of.
Oh yeah, Antifa was getting messed up that night. Oh, they're not going to say how Antifa stabbed that guy? They're not going to mention that? Oh, okay.
After that rally, the Proud Boys, after that rally, engaged in serious acts of violence in downtown D.C. Some Trump supporters and self-identified Proud Boys vandalized churches after that rally. If we look at these events, it's clear how we got here. Because what did the president do after that? He turned right around, and a little over a week later, he began coordinating the January 6th Save America rally with the same people who had planned the 2nd Million MAGA March. You'll recall that the Women for America First had organized that 2nd Million MAGA March. They had originally planned rallies for January 22nd and January 23rd, after the inauguration. But Donald Trump had other plans.
The Proud Boys, by the way, did not vandalize the church. They pulled BLM signs off the church that were nailed onto the walls.
For a big protest, the day billing it as wild. Just days later, Women for America First amended their permit to hold their rally on January 6th, pursuant to the president's save the date, instead of after the inauguration. This was deliberate. Reports confirm that the president himself, President Trump, became directly involved with the planning of the event, including the speaking lineup, even the music to be played, just as he chose the music for his retreat of the caravan.
Is all rap music fight music? Is this fight music we're hearing right now?
And he brought the same people who spoke at the 2nd Million MAGA rally to help as well. Trump's campaign advisor, Katrina Pearson, who you recall said on December 12th that this is only the beginning, we are the cavalry, also became directly involved in planning the event. They even sent out invitations together. This is Amy Kremer, one of the founders of Women for America First, tweeting the invitation, tagging Donald Trump and other organizers, inviting the same supporters who had just engaged in serious violence at the second Million MAGA rally to show up to the largest rally to stop the steal. And President Trump seemed to have other plans for what was going to happen at that rally, too. Women for America First had initially planned for the rally-goers to remain at the ellipse until the counting of the state electoral slates was completed, just like they had remained at Freedom Plaza after the second Million MAGA march. In fact, the permit stated in no uncertain terms that the march from the ellipse was not permitted. It was not until after President Trump and his team became involved in the planning that the march from the ellipse to the Capitol came about, in direct contravention of the original permit. This was not a coincidence. None of this was. Donald Trump, over many months, cultivated violence, praised it, and then when he saw the violence his supporters were capable of, he channeled it to his big, wild, historic event. He organized January 6th with the same people that had just organized a rally, resulting in substantial violence, and made absolutely sure this time these violent rally-goers wouldn't just remain in place. He made sure that those violent people would literally march right here to our steps, from the ellipse to the Capitol, to stop the steal. His cavalry. This was deliberate. And because the President of the United States incited this, because he was orchestrating this, because he was inviting them, the insurgents were not shy about their planning. They believed they were following the orders of the commander-in-chief. They were, as the tweet we just saw, quite literally his cavalry. So they posted exact blueprints of the attack openly, loudly, proudly. And they did this all over public forums. These were not just hidden posts in dark websites that Trump would not have seen. Quite the opposite. We know that President Trump's team monitored these websites. We know this because his advisors confirm it. An ex-White House and campaign insider, as you'll read, who has known both Scavino and the president for years, said there was no way that Scavino and the Trump social media operation would not have been aware of the plan circulating online to storm the Capitol. Because, and I quote, "The Trump operation closely monitored the web's darkest corners, ranging from mainstream sites such as Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit, to fringe message boards like 4chan and XChan, now called XCun, to the Donald.win, an offshoot of a banned Reddit community dedicated to rabidly supporting all things Trump." They actively monitored the exact sites, like the Donald.win, on which these insurrectionists wrote their posts. And so what would Trump and his team have seen when they were monitoring these white sites? What would his supporters have said? They would have seen a clear roadmap of exactly what happened. This is an example of a post that was captured from one of the sites dedicated to Donald Trump that we just talked about, shortly before the site was taken down. And the meme reads, quote, "The Capitol is our goal. Everything else is a distraction. Every corrupt member of Congress locked in one room and surrounded by real Americans is an opportunity that will never present itself again." Let that sink in. Think about that. The exact thing that happened on January 6th, that was their goal. And they said it out loud on sites that the Trump administration was actively monitoring. A third-party site captured a post on the Donald.win where one user posted, quote, "This cannot simply be a protest. It has to be the establishment of the MAGA militia with the command offices set up, with all further militia tactical missions spreading from there." Another user said in response, quote, "We will have to achieve an actual tactical victory, like storming and occupying the Capitol, to have the intended effect." That's what they understood Donald Trump to want. There it is in black and white. And they explained why they felt justified in this. Another poster on the forum, the Donald.win, wrote on January 4th, quote, "If Congress illegally certifies Biden, Trump would have absolutely no choice but to demand us to storm Congress and kill/beat them up." Donald Trump will have no choice. That was what he made them believe, to the point his supporters felt justified even in carrying weapons and storming our Capitol. This was in post after post. Here's another. When discussing how to carry guns into D.C., one noted, quote, "Yes, it's illegal, but this is war, and we are clearly in a post-legal phase of our society." What? They treated it as a war, and they meant it. The morning of the attack, under the thread, "Today I told my kids goodbye," one poster wrote, "Today I had the very difficult conversation with my children that Daddy might not come home from D.C. Within a matter of hours, that post amassed 4,000 likes. President Trump had truly made them believe that their election had been stolen and that it was their patriotic duty to fight to steal it back. Patriotic, a term he gave those who use violence for him, and they were willing to say goodbye to their children for this fight. And their supporters didn't just rely on entering the Capitol with guns haphazardly. They had maps of this building. They talked through which tunnels to use and how to get to the Senate chamber. Some posted specific floor plans, layouts of the Capitol, alongside hopes of overwhelming law enforcement to, quote, "find the tunnels, arrest the worst traitors." Posters also fixated on what they saw as their ability to easily overwhelm the Capitol Police, as, quote, "there are only around 2,000 of them." And again, they urged, quote, "the Capitol is our goal. Everything else is a distraction." There were hundreds of these posts, hundreds, monitored by the Trump administration. And these posts, they were chillingly accurate, right down to communication devices. A new affidavit filed by the FBI described preparations by the right-wing group, the Proud Boys, to storm the Capitol, including using earpieces and walkie-talkies to direct movements throughout the building. This happened. That's the level of planning in advance that occurred. They had earpieces. On the slide, you'll see Proud Boy.
Oh no, earpieces.
Has an earpiece in his right ear, consistent with the affidavit. And in addition to these detailed posts, they made clear why they thought they should do this, why they thought they could do this. It wasn't just that they were doing it following the president's orders. They thought he would help them. A third-party site captured a post on the Donald.win again, the site monitored by Trump's team, and he wrote, quote, "He," meaning Donald Trump in this instance, "can order the Nat Guard to stand down if needed. Unfortunately, he has no control over the Capitol Police, but there are only around 2,000 of them, and a lot are useless fat asses or girls." It's all right there. The overall goal, maps of the Capitol, the weapons, communication devices. They even said publicly, openly, proudly, that President Trump will help them to commandeer the National Guard, so all they have to do is overwhelm the 2,000 Capitol Police officers. This was reported in the NBC News and the Washington Post with headlines like, "Violent threats ripple through far-right internet forums ahead of protests. Pro-Trump forums erupt with violent threats ahead of Wednesday's rally against the 2020 election." Fox News also reported that the Proud Boys would come to the January 6th rally prepared for violent action, even quoting a Proud Boy member who said they would, quote, incognito and spread across downtown D.C. in smaller numbers. City officials, seeing these same warnings, also publicly warned about the violence and unlawful weapons at the event. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser cautioned residents of the District of Columbia to avoid the downtown area while the rally attendees were in town. Federal law enforcement warned of these threats also. On January 3rd, a Capitol Police intelligence report warned of a violent scenario in which Congress itself could be the target of the angry supporters of President Trump on January 6. According to that report, obtained by the Washington Post, supporters of the current president see January 6, 2021 as the last opportunity to overturn the results of the presidential election. This sense of desperation and disappointment may lead to more incentive to become violent. Unlike previous post-election protests, the targets of the pro-Trump supporters are not necessarily the counter-protesters as they were previously, but rather Congress itself is the target for January 6. The day before the rioters stormed the Congress, an FBI office in Virginia also issued an explicit warning that extremists were preparing to travel to Washington to commit violence and, quote, war, according to internal reports. The FBI report cited to an online post where the user declared that Trump supporters should go to Washington and get violent. The supporter said, quote, "Stop calling this a march or a rally or a protest. Go there ready for war. We get our president or we die." These threat warnings were not just hypothetical. Actual arrests occurred in the days leading to the attack. On January 4th, 2 days before the rally, one extremely well-publicized arrest was of a Proud Boy leader who destroyed a church's Black Lives Matter banner a month earlier during the December 12th Second Million MAGA March. Report emphasized that when he was arrested, he was carrying high-capacity firearm magazines, which he claimed were meant to be supplied to another rally attendee for January 6th. By the night of January 6th attack, D.C. police had already made 6 arrests in connection with the planned protests on charges of carrying weapons, ammunitions, assaulting police. This is all in public view, all of it. The truth is usually seen and rarely heard. Truth is truth, whether denied or not. And the truth is, President Trump had spent months calling his supporters to a march on a specific day, at a specific time, in specific places to stop the certification. And leading up to the event, there were hundreds of posts online showing that his supporters took this as a call to arms to attack the Capitol. There were detailed posts of plans to attack online. Law enforcement warned that these posts were real threats and even made arrests days leading up to the attack. And yet, in the face of all this, these credible warnings of serious, dangerous threats to our Capitol, when those thousands of people were standing in front of President Trump, ready to take orders and attack, this is what he said: "We're going to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And that's why this is different. And that's why he must be convicted and disqualified.
Representative Dean will now return to the events of January 6th itself. She will demonstrate President Trump's repeated incitement of the crowd that morning as he directed them to the Capitol in his last-ditch effort to retain his hold on power.
For me and for many Americans, January 6th is forever etched in our memories. I went to work with a sense of excitement, the start of my second term in Congress and the first time I would participate in the certification of a presidential election. And then we all know what happened. I know many of us have similar experiences from that day, but I'll briefly share mine. I stood with colleagues in the gallery above the House floor to observe the Arizona challenge. Moments later, police radios reported a breach of the Capitol grounds. Someone shouted up to us, "Duck, then lie down, then ready your gas masks." Shortly after, there was a terrifying banging on the chamber doors. I will never forget that sound. Shouts and panicked calls to my husband and to my sons, instructions to flee, and then the constant whirring of the gas masks filtering the air. The chamber of the United States House of Representatives turned to chaos. For Donald Trump, it was a very different day. Earlier, I showed you Donald Trump's desperate attempts to maintain power, ignoring adverse court rulings, attacking elected officials, pressuring his Justice Department, even attacking his own vice president. You saw a man who refused to lose, who was desperate to retain power by any means necessary. You saw a man willing to attack anyone and everyone who got in his way. And you saw a man who thought he could play by different rules. He told his supporters, as my colleague Ms. Plaskett just showed you, exactly what he thought those different rules were. Combat, fight, violence. This was not just one speech. This was weeks and weeks of deliberate effort by Donald Trump to overturn the election results so that he didn't have to give up the presidency. The speech on January 6th builds on, refers to, and amplifies that same pattern, the pattern Trump had used and broadcasted for months. He refused to lose, his attacks on others, and his different rules. The only thing different about his speech on January 6th from all these other times that we went through was that he was no longer telling his base just that they had to fight to stop the steal. He was finally telling them, now is the time to do it. Here's the place, and here's how. For weeks, he urged his supporters to show up at a specific time and place, and when they got there, he told them exactly what he wanted. Let's start with his desperation. You saw how much planning went into January the 6th, and when the day arrived, Donald Trump's desperation was in full force. Between the time he woke up on January the 5th and the start of the Save America March, that next day, he had tweeted 34 times. When Donald Trump wants to get his message across, he is not shy, as you all know. These tweets were relentless, and these tweets all centered on his singular focus, his drumbeat to motivate, anger, and incite his supporters. His big lie. The presidential election had been rigged, it had been stolen from him, and they had to fight to stop it. And the timing was no coincidence. He sent 34 tweets because this was his last chance to rile up his supporters before the big, historic, wild event he had planned. Now, I won't go through all of these tweets, but let me just highlight a few. At 1 in the morning, he tweeted, "If Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Mike can send it back." This will look familiar to you because Mr. Liu just showed you how Trump had privately, he was pressuring and publicly attacking his vice president to stop the certification. And when Vice President Pence refused, when he explained that the Constitution simply does not allow him to stop certification, Donald Trump provoked his base to attack him. The late in the evening tweet was no different. It just got more forceful. Let's be clear, what Donald Trump was saying, that Vice President Pence could send back the certification, was not true. For one thing, all 50 states had ratified this election. And for another, Vice President Pence explained to him that he does not have the power to unilaterally overturn states' votes and just send the certification back. And Donald Trump knew this, but this was his last chance to get his vice president to stop the certification, and so he was willing to say or do just about anything. These tweets attacking the election as fraudulent, attacking his vice president, and urging his supporters to fight continued throughout the morning. Here's another example. At 8:17 a.m., he tweeted, "All Mike Pence has to do is send it back to them and back to the states, and we win." And we win. That's what he said, even though by then he had clearly lost. As Trump continued tweeting, the Save America March at the White House was now in full swing. The speakers who warmed up the crowd for Trump were members of his inner circle, family members, his personal attorney, people President Trump had deputized to speak on his behalf. Some of the speakers also spoke at the second Million MAGA March, which resulted in serious violence. The warm-up acts on January 6th focused on promoting Donald Trump's big lie. They stoked the same fears, a stolen election, of fraud, of ripping victory away from them. And the speakers told them what to do about it. As the crowd erupted in "Fight for Trump," chants throughout that morning, Donald Trump Jr. urged, "That's the message. These guys better fight for Trump." The speakers lasted 3 hours, repeating President Trump's message, and finally, at about noon, Donald Trump took the stage with the seal of the presidency on his podium and the White House as his backdrop. President Trump spoke for more than 70 minutes. His narrative was familiar. It was the same message he had spent months spreading to his supporters. The big lie. The election was stolen, that they should never concede, and that his supporters should be patriots and fight much harder to stop the steal, to take back our country. The same phrases he'd spread for weeks, but now the message was immediate. Now it was just no longer just fight, it was fight right now.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal.
That set the tone. Our country has had enough, and we will not take it anymore. He told them and us right at the beginning that the only way to take back the country was to fight. Let's look at what he said next.
And Rudy, you did a great job. He's got guts. You know what? He's got guts, unlike a lot of people in the Republican Party. He's got guts. He fights.
Ms. Plaskett showed you example after example of Donald Trump, when confronted with violence, praising it. We saw him instruct the Proud Boys, a violent extremist group, to stand back and stand by. That group was there on January the 6th. We saw him praise a caravan of his supporters after they tried to drive a bus belonging to the Biden campaign off the road. The organizer of that attack was there on January the 6th. And we saw him team up with the organizers of the violent Second MAGA Million March to plan his rally on January the 6th. And what does he do at that rally? He tells Giuliani he's doing a great job addressing the crowd, saying he has guts to call for fighting. And to be clear, this is what he was praising.
So, let's have trial by combat.
Trial by combat. Donald Trump praised Rudy, said he did a good job, had guts for telling the crowd that we need trial by combat. Next, more attacks.
All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people.
This attack, like the tweets he sent that morning, had a purpose: convincing his supporters that the future of our country, of our democracy, hinged on whether Vice President Pence would overturn the election, something he knew Pence could not and would not do. He called out Vice President Pence 9 times that day, and each time he got more forceful. Here's what he said at 12:15.
And we're going to have to fight much harder, and Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us, and if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country, because you're sworn to uphold our Constitution. Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
We're going to have to fight much harder, and Mike Pence will have to come through for us. That's what he said. And he told the crowd what he meant and exactly what to do, literally commanding them to confront us at the Capitol. He even told them he'd walk there with them, which of course was not true. And then he told them exactly what to do when they got to the Capitol. You'll never take your country back with weakness. You have to show strength. And don't forget who is standing there. The same people Ms. Plaskett described to you. Many people violent people law enforcement had warned would be armed and would be targeting us. One of President Trump's key defenses focus on what he said for a few seconds, 15 minutes into the speech.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
In a speech spanning almost 11,000 words, yes, we did check, that was the one time, the only time President Trump used the word peaceful or any suggestion of nonviolence. The implication of the president's tweets, the rally, and the speeches were clear. President Trump used the word fight or fighting 20 times, including telling the crowd they needed to fight like hell to save our democracy. We know how the crowd responded to Donald Trump's words, and he knew how they responded to his speech. Here is the evidence of how the crowd reacted.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol. Yeah! Probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
Yes.
Right.
I like how they included peacefully and patriotically while trying to prove that he was inciting violence. That doesn't make sense. They're so stupid.
Yeah.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Storm the Capitol. Invade the Capitol. Fight, 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 fight. Take the Capitol right now. These were the words of the crowd. Trump was telling them to fight, and he would keep telling them to fight throughout the rest of his speech. These are not only words of aggression, they are words of insurrection. And if you have any doubt, listen to what he says next.
Today we see a very important event, though, because right over there, right there, we see the event going to take place. And I'm going to be watching because history is going to be made. We're going to see whether or not we have great and courageous leaders or whether or not we have leaders that should be ashamed of themselves. Throughout history, throughout eternity, they'll be ashamed. And you know what? If they do the wrong thing, we should never, ever forget that they did. Never forget. We should never, ever forget.
The Commander-in-Chief points to Congress and tells those assembled, I'm going to be watching. History is going to be made. This was clearly not just some rally or march or protest. This was about Donald Trump trying to steal the election for himself, claiming that the election was fraudulent, illegitimate, so that his supporters would fight to take it back. In fact, after stoking the crowd's anger for nearly 40 minutes, after repeating false election conspiracy after false election conspiracy, he said this in no uncertain terms.
You will have an illegitimate president. That's what you'll have.
Any outcome besides him keeping the presidency would be illegitimate. This was building on the big lie of a rigged and stolen election. And here's what he said a little later in the speech.
When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. So I hope Mike has the courage to do what he has to do.
When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. We told you that context matters. Here's the context. This was not just one reference or a message to supporters by a politician to fight for a cause. He'd assembled thousands of violent people, people he knew were capable of violence, people he had seen be violent. They were standing now in front of him. And then he pointed to us, lit the fuse, and sent an angry mob to fight the perceived enemy, his own vice president and the members of Congress, as we certified an election.
But I said, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Our exciting adventures and boldest endeavors have not yet begun. My fellow Americans, for our movement, for our children, and for our beloved country. And I say this, despite all that's happened, the best is yet to come. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol, and we're going to try and give. The Democrats are hopeless. They're never voting for anything. Not even one vote. But we're going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I want to thank you all. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you all for being here. This is incredible. Thank you very much.
Fight for Trump! 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 Who we here for? Trump! Who we here for? Trump! Fight for 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 Trump!
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And there was only one fight left, and it was a mile up the road. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, ordered the crowd to march on Congress, and so the crowd marched. This is incredible, you heard him say. That's how President Trump ended his speech. I'd like to close with a very brief timeline of what was happening in parallel alongside the President as he spoke on the 6th of January. A little after noon, President Trump began his speech with a fiery refusal to concede. He commanded the crowd to fight and march down Pennsylvania Avenue. And around 12:20, some rally-goers, some attendees, began marching. By 12:30, as President Trump continued to incite his supporters, large segments of the rally crowd had amassed at the Capitol. At 12:53, as the president's speech was playing on cell phone broadcasts, the outermost barricade of the northwest side of the Capitol was breached. And Capitol Police were forced back to the steps of the Capitol. At 1:10, the president ended his speech with a final call to fight and a final order to march to the Capitol. At 1:45, the president's followers surged past Capitol Police, shouting, "This is a revolution!" Just after 2:10, an hour after President Trump ended his speech, the insurrectionist mob overwhelmed Capitol security and made it inside the halls of Congress. Because the truth is, this attack never would have happened but for Donald Trump. And so they came, draped in Trump's flag, and used our flag, the American flag, to batter and to bludgeon. And at 2:30, I heard that terrifying banging on House chamber doors. For the first time in more than 200 years, the seat of our government was ransacked on our watch.
Cool story. Thank you so much, Edward Thomas, Bones Mama, for your donations and all your support. I really appreciate you. And thank you so much, Edward and Terry, for joining the membership program, and welcome to the family. You're officially hooligans. Well, I guess they're going to take another break. I'm not sure who said it, but yeah, there probably will be a protest in Seattle later tonight because of the shooting that happened last night. If that does happen, which it probably will, yes, I will be covering that, as well as anything else that's going on after this is done. It just depends on the time, because I think this is supposed to go till 8, which is another 4 hours and 15 minutes left of this, and we'll be doing the same thing tomorrow. I'd really like to find another camera. I got this janky little webcam I just dug out of a box That's why I'm all tiny on the screen. You can't even see my cool Jeff Mac shirt. Dang it. Technology, you know. I can't wait to hear the other side, you know, where they show the facts. Nobody's crying. They're not referring to the people who went to the Capitol as armed when they were not armed. Taking things way out of context. They might as well have just like crop single words out of all the recordings they have from the president and then just made their own sentences. Just put all the sentences together. They might as well have just gone that far. It's nonsense. And it's nothing new. That's how they push their stuff on CNN and stuff. That's why they were saying the president was a racist for, you know, the first year he was in office. They're taking everything out of context. And I mean, we all know he couldn't even go through a speech without having to like stop what he was saying to be like, oh, they're going to take that and they're going to make that sound really bad. But, you know, they're just a bunch of idiots. And they're still doing it. They're still doing it. And it's crazy because half the stuff they're showing is like contradicting to what they're trying to prove. You know, saying he's inciting violence and this, that, and the other. And then literally showing a recording of him saying, yeah, do it peacefully and patriotically. But, you know, that doesn't count. That doesn't. The part of the evidence you're supposed to focus on is these specific words and just ignore the whole rest of the recording or the whole rest of the tweet or whatever. And yeah, it would be interesting if somebody stood up and was like, well, prove it. Let's see those tweets. Now that they had banned them off social media. Stupid. That stuff is stupid. So I really can't wait to hear the other side defend the president. Because, you know, they had their stuff together yesterday. Oh, and something that's interesting about that is the guy that spoke at the end of yesterday's live, who it was very boring and very long, and I understand that. But he was very precise and specific on what he was talking about, quoting the Constitution, you know, all of that stuff. He had it very well put together, although it was long and drawn out. Today, YouTube flagged it. Some Japanese YouTube channel filed a claim against me saying that they own that recording of that guy's defense, or, you know, his statement or whatever in the defense of the president. Yeah, apparently some Japanese channel owns the rights to that. So they're going to try and either clip the video to where that part of the speech isn't there, or the whatever you want to call it, the defense, or they're going to take the whole video down. So I'm going to end up having to post all this stuff on BitChute, so, you know, you can actually watch the whole thing uncut. I hate when they cut that because, you know, tomorrow or the next day, if the video stays up and they just cut that segment out, people watch it and then it skips right there. And then I get all these accusations and all this hate mail and, oh, I'm censoring stuff and yada, yada. Because people's brain don't work. You know, it just doesn't work. They don't understand. Like, I would show the pew-pew sticks. I used to be able to. I used to get away with showing the pew-pews on the screen. We watched the Kyle event happen live and YouTube didn't even catch it. They didn't even catch it. And like now there's so many rules. I got to jump through all these hoops just to provide the truth. And even though I go through my best efforts, any little thing that YouTube does to censor the videos, to edit the videos, to remove the videos, big wave of hate mail shows up telling me, you know, all these bad things that I'm doing. It's stupid. It's so stupid. It's ridiculous the way that certain people act. What I think is funny is how these people are describing Trump supporters, and they're not even really mentioning that there was non-Trump supporters who believed in the irregularities. And then they don't talk about Biden supporters at all because, I mean, where do you even find those at? I don't see those anywhere. I didn't see any at the inauguration. I don't see any in the live chats whenever Biden is on the screen, or Walter rather. And I also think it's interesting that we have this impeachment trial happening today and yesterday, and during the watching this live, my phone's going off with all these notifications that Walter's live and the vice president is live and the redhead who likes to circle back 100 times was live. Like, they're putting all, I'm wondering if they're double scheduling all this stuff because they know that people who are interested in the president and President Trump are going to be watching this and not watching the other live streams that is going on. And so it makes me really wonder, what are they trying to push through in the background while this is happening? Because I get done doing this and I'm trying to eat and shower and use the bathroom and do some basic human stuff. I'm not really trying to sit down and watch another 2, 3, 4 hours of Walter mumbling through his teleprompter, or the vice president sitting there smirking and just looking evil and vile, or dealing with the redhead who's not going to answer any questions and just circle back, do a couple 360s, the full hokey pokey over there. It's rough. It's rough. I got to sit here and watch a lot of information. I wish I could multi-stream all of that stuff to where we could watch all of it, but obviously that's impossible. But something sneaky is going on. If this was such a big deal, like they're trying to make it seem, why are they double scheduling everything? Why are they pushing so many other things on the same time that this is happening? That doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, so I don't know. Hopefully, because we're about halfway through today's show at the circus, hopefully the rest of this event will have the people who are defending the president, and hopefully they got some, it's not even really hopefully, they were totally killing it yesterday. That guy got up there and he just laid it down. And then they took a vote, and of course the yays got it because there's more yays than nays in the room. They have total control from the House to the Senate to the White House. This is going to go the way they want it, regardless. It's already been proved. They proved it yesterday. It's unconstitutional. There's no reason that this should even be going on. You can't impeach a president that's not active president. And they still voted for it. They still were like, yeah, let the show go on. So I have a feeling that this is just all for show. They're going to get their way at the end of this. I don't know. I don't know what to say, because I don't want to tell people to lose hope, because you got to have hope. You got to have hope no matter what it looks like. But I see a lot of people like talking about the gun bill. Like, oh, we can't let the gun bill go through. How do you stop it? How do you stop it? If they want it, they'll pass it. There's no one there to defend it. There's no one there to stand against it. If the majority wants it, they're going to get it. It doesn't matter what we think and what we feel and this, that, and the other. You see it happening. You see it happening right here on the screen live. So I've read that gun bill. What is it, like H-127 or something? It's not good. It's not good. It's totally standing all over our rights, just standing on the neck of our rights. But if they want that to pass, it's going to. It's going to. And I like when they've talked about all this, stuff that has to do with our Second Amendment. I like how they're like, well, we'll reimburse you with some cash. Oh, yes, just pay us for our rights. We'll just give you our rights and you'll give us $50 and we're all supposed to be happy. They just think we're stupid. And at this point, it doesn't even matter what we think, because they have control over everything. So I don't know. It's rough. It's rough to sit here and watch it, especially like as much stuff as I see. I always have to kind of stand back. You get submerged in all this information, and it's hard to like walk away from it. People are like, oh, I'm going to get my nails done. I'm going to get my hair done. I'm like, the country's burning down. What are you talking about? So I have to step back from it, every once in a while and stuff, not get too close to the subject. But it's crazy. It's really crazy to see the footage that they're showing, because in certain ways, I feel like that was the last time that people were free. I mean, not that they should be violent, and, you know, I'm not condoning any of the garbage that they're saying happened that day, but you don't see people rallying anymore. You don't see people marching anymore. You don't see people standing up and speaking about what they believe in, unless it's BLM, unless it's Antifa. That, you know, those are the only people who are allowed to stand up and speak, march, blow out windows. That's totally fine. They're just, you know, that's good. You know, like, they don't even mention it. They're like, oh, the Proud Boys were vandalizing a church. They weren't vandalizing the church. The church had BLM like spray paint signs, like boards that were spray painted, nailed to the church, and the Proud Boys ripped them off the church. I mean, I guess it could be considered vandalism to some degree, but, you know, let's just totally forget about the fact that BLM showed up in July and spray painted all the statues. They spray painted that whole church. They spray painted the sidewalks and the street and everything, and then they came back and painted BLM in the street right in front of the White House, after setting fires of cars and dumpsters and piling just random debris and setting it on fire. They had, you know, 15-foot fires right in the middle of the streets. The Secret Service was there. The National Guard was there. They were clashing hardcore for like 3 or 4 days non-stop. There was protesters there 24 hours. We covered that way before I was on camera, way before I even spoke on the microphone. I had that up live. Not even 10 people in the chat back then, you know, and that's kind of the problem, is people didn't realize that that stuff was happening. And now the way they talk about things as if it didn't happen. They got 3 10-foot black gates in front of the White House because of those events. They don't talk about that. No, they don't talk about that. They call it the BLM Plaza, because they forfeited that area to BLM and Antifa. They forfeited it to them. They gave it to them. And sometimes it's referred to, depending on who you're watching, as Freedom Plaza. But if you look, it still has BLM painted right in the street. Like, that area has been forfeited to BLM. Every time there was a march or a rally or anything over these last couple months, that's where BLM was. That's where they were clashing with police officers that they're not mentioning during this trial. So, oh, the Proud Boys showed up and all Trump supporters showed up and they were violent and they were marching in the streets with their flags and yada yada. Oh, they don't want to talk about BLM and all them with their makeshift shields and, you know, Molotov cocktails and all that kind of stuff that they had. No, they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about that at all. It's so stupid. It is so stupid. Everybody knows about it. I feel like more people know about the stuff that Antifa does at these protests than what anyone else does. Because Antifa and them are the ones that are actually like taking out officers and showing up with makeshift weapons and burning stuff down. If I show a BLM protest, we might have 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 people show up in the chat. I show a rally or like some sort of political event, look, we don't even have 1,000 people in the chat. Like, this is not normal. I mean, it is for these kind of events, but that's my point, is that if I'm showing people burning the city down, oh, we get 5,000, 10,000 people in the chat. You know, the chat gets so crazy that sometimes I have to put it above a minute, where you'll write something and it doesn't actually appear in the chat for a minute because it's going so fast. And so then they stand there and, you know, I don't know if they're lying to each other or if they think they're lying to us, standing here in this trial being like, oh yeah, you know, I don't know who Antifa is. I don't know who BLM is. You know, they must not be making that much noise. Who are you lying to? We know the truth. We know the truth. And, you know, there's a big subject here, which is like kind of the whole point that all of this even happened, that I can't even talk about. Because if I bring it up, they'll shut the channel down. I've received like 2 or 3 emails now from YouTube. Like, if you mention any kind of irregularities, we will shut you down. You know, they also took all my footage from the 6th. They took it all down. They don't want to show any of that. Just like anytime they went to court all the stuff that happened in court. They took those videos too, because they're a part of it. You know, they're a part of this. This is all planned. This is all orchestrated. But that's why we got to watch it. For a lot of people, they see this. Maybe they're seeing me for the first time or whatever, and they show up and they're like, oh, why are we watching these really boring hearings and stuff? Because it's important. Because these people are doing crazy things and passing laws and mandates and everything else, and it affects all of us. Even though it's super boring and these people are super crazy and they're, you know, lying their face off, there's people in power who believe these lies. Just as much as toothless Timmy up the street who smokes meth. You know, like from crackheads down the street to politicians in office, there's people who believe the lies that are coming out of these people's mouth. And the more that believe it, the more it might as well be true, because the effects of what they do while they're in power affects all of us. And so that's why we have to watch and see what's happening. And, you know, in a lot of ways it feels kind of pointless, because they've already, you know, proven that what we say doesn't matter. What we think and feel doesn't matter, because they're going to overrule us and do what they want for the greater good, for national security. You know, whatever they want to put behind it, oh, we're going to, you know, executive order this because we don't care what you say or what you think. So regardless of how much power they've left us with, it's still important to see where you're going. You know, you don't drive a car with your eyes closed because you don't want to run into something and not know it. That's what happens when you don't watch these kind of events, is that when just because you look away doesn't mean this isn't going to affect you, that this isn't going to shape the future of the country. This should be important to all of us, even though it's really hard to watch. And we know they're lying. We know that pretty much everything they're saying is not true. It's fictional, and you can hear it. The way they read off their little pre-written, you know, pamphlets and crap they got, it sounds like they're reading stories to children. The way they enunciate words and stuff like that, they might as well be reading to the kindergarten class, letting us, you know, giving us their story, and then they got to drop a couple tears. That lady who was on, that's the worst crier I've ever seen. I've never seen somebody fake cry so poorly. She was like, oh my God. Anyways, he said this, that, and the other, and oh my God. Like, you're terrible. You're terrible, lady. You need a better acting coach. You're doing a terrible job. Stupid. So I'm really hoping these next 4 hours are something to be proud to watch, to actually see something that makes sense, you know, to see the facts, to see that somebody's actually got their eyes open, their ears open. They're not sitting there with their head in the sand. Hopefully. I think that's what we're going to see, as long as they're letting the other side speak for the next 4 hours, which I think they should, because we haven't heard from them at all today. But I think that we'll see facts. I don't believe they reference footage that much, but if they were going to, they should go back to that footage from, I don't know, I don't think it was Arizona. It might have been Georgia. I think that was Georgia. From that hearing where they played the, 12 seconds of that video showing the president on the phone speaking into the microphone, just to be like, oh, well, he called into the hearing and talked over the phone, and that's never been done. And then they just didn't show anymore. The people defending the president should play the rest of that clip, because when the president got off the phone and everyone applauded, the elected officials that were there on the board all agreed. They all stood up and agreed. They were like, yeah, there's something. And then they, pulled their vote for certification. You know, they undid it. Well, they were going to. And they spoke. I got to be very careful on how I talk here. I know what I'm trying to say, and I know it sounds like I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I have to be very careful on what I say. But they should play the rest of that clip, because it speaks for itself. It speaks volumes about what's being said. And I like that they're trying to single out the president as if he's the only one that felt that way. Like he just wrote a tweet and 1 million people showed up at the Capitol because they were told to. It wasn't because they felt some type of way. It wasn't because they could see it with their own eyes, not even just through, what the president had said, but those hearings, the president wasn't even there. So how does that influence people, through the president? It doesn't. People feel and think and see things on their own outside of what the president tweets. So they don't want to mention that. They act like all those people were told to be there. It wasn't that they saw an opportunity to speak up. And again, I'm not condoning violence or anything that these idiots on the screen are saying, but obviously these people felt strongly. They acted on their own. They showed up from all over the country. They weren't told to do that. This stuff affects everybody. The things that we're seeing over the last couple months from every state, like how many times did they say Michigan? They were just talking as if Michigan was a victim. I live in Michigan. I know how bad it sucks here. And during those hearings, we were watching the elected official, what is her name? Something Johnson, who could not contain herself. Listening to people give their testimony, she could not contain herself. She was screaming about racism and talking over people while they were talking and would not let them speak if they were saying something that she didn't like. But she's on the board. She's an elected official that was acting so inappropriately. And eventually she got removed from the board. They made her step down or something. They did something. And she got all mad and she wrote a bunch of posts on Facebook, but then she made Facebook videos inciting violence and talking bad about the other board members because, again, she disagreed and has no professionalism at all. And that happened here in Michigan, where I live, where the only victims here that I'm seeing are the people. It's not the way they were just talking. They were talking like, oh, those poor elected officials in Michigan were being badmouthed and talked down upon and blah, 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 blah. No. If you watch any of the stuff that happens in Michigan, or if you live in Michigan, you're probably very well aware of how it happens here, how it goes here. We live in communist Michigan, hardcore. Our governor doesn't give nothing about us. They don't care at all. And they're like totally upfront. They put us in a lockdown. They were talking about rolling back the lockdown, but they were going to do it like by county. And then the only place they unlocked was where their summer home was, so their husband can go fishing. And that's not a speculation. There's photos, there's video, there's plenty of reports that actually happened. And that was the only place that was unlocked at the time. And then, something happened. Oh, the numbers got higher. Better lock everything back up now that, the husband's done with his, fishing trip. They're blatant about it here. They just spit right in your face. They're like, who cares about your freedom? They don't care about it here. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, I understand you guys get mad. I see the stuff you write in the chat. I always, I can't always respond on it or discuss it. But I understand why you guys feel that way. And I feel some type of way too, but I can't be sitting here on the screen talking bad. They're going to shut the channel down. How am I going to give you guys the truth? How are we going to watch the truth together if I act out or I allow certain things to happen that gets the channel banned? I can't. This is me being responsible and biting my tongue so we can watch the truth together. So let's see the rest of this circus. And I will give all the shout outs for everyone that just donated. Don't think it's going unnoticed. I have a list here, and thank you so much.
We have order in the Senate, please.
Thank you, Mr.
Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate. At this point, Representatives Plaskett and Swalwell will take you through the actual day of the attack. They will recreate the attack as it unfolded, focusing on the threats to Vice President Pelosi, Vice President Pence, Speaker Pelosi, the joint session, and law enforcement. I do want to alert everyone that there is some very graphic, violent footage coming, just so people are aware. And I'm going to call again on Ms. Plaskett, who I should also tell you went to work at the Department of Justice and was the senior counsel for Deputy Attorney General Larry Thompson under Attorney General Ashcroft. So she's a very well-trained and experienced prosecutor, as you can tell.
Mr. President, senators, almost all of us were here on January 6th, and we all have our individual experiences, what we felt, what we saw, what we heard. We've seen clips and reports in the media, but I have to tell you, it was not until preparing for this trial that I understood the full scope and learned the information that you're going to see, that I understood the effort to attack our seat of government in order to carry out President Trump's mission to prevent the certification of a presidential election. It was an attack to our republic, to our democratic process. My colleagues, Manager Swalwell and I, are going to walk you through the attack on the Capitol that day and the danger that it posed to the Vice President, to the Speaker of the House, to you all as senators, my colleagues in the House, Capitol Police, and everyone who works in and around this Capitol. As you have heard, President Trump had been telling his supporters and his millions of Twitter followers that Pence had the ability to secure the presidency for Trump, that Mike Pence alone had the power to overturn the election results, if he would just do it. But at 12:55 p.m. on January 6th, Vice President Pence formally refused the president's demand. He wrote, and I quote, "It is my considered judgment that my oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not." Pence ended his letter with a passage including the words, "I will do my duty." Even though the count resulted in the defeat of his party and his own candidacy, Vice President Pence had the courage to stand against the president, tell the American public the truth, and uphold our Constitution. That is patriotism. That patriotism is also what put Vice President in so much danger on January 6th by the mob sent by our president. To the president and the mob he incited, that duty to our Constitution was an all-out betrayal. And the vice president was the direct target of that rage. At 12:53 p.m., senators, members of Congress, Vice President Pence were in their respective chambers. Outside, rioters, including some linked to the Proud Boys, broke through the outer barricade surrounding the lawn of the Capitol. 12 minutes later, Vice President Pence began presiding over the joint session of Congress to certify the results of the presidential election. You can see Vice President Pence gaveling in the joint session here.
Madam Speaker, members of Congress, pursuant to the Constitution and the laws of the United States, the Senate and House of Representatives are meeting in joint session to verify the certificates and count the votes of the electors of the several states for President and Vice President of the United States.
While Vice President Pence presided over the joint session, Trump supporters began their assault on our Capitol. Radio communications from the Metropolitan Police Department highlight how during and following President Trump's speech, Trump supporters descended on the Capitol and became increasingly violent. What you are about to hear has not been made public before.
Multiple capital entries! Multiple capital entries!
1318.
Hey, 12 to 50, we're coming around from the south side.
Be advised of speed and vision.
Intel 1, be advised, you got a group of about 50 charging up the hill on the west front, just north of the stairs. They're approaching the wall now.
They're starting to dismantle their reviewing stands and throwing metal poles at us. Cruiser 50, give me DSO up here now! DSO! Multiple law enforcement entries! DSO, get up here! All right, we're 30 seconds out. We need some reinforcements up here now. They're starting to pull the gates down. They're throwing metal poles at us. Cruiser 50, DSO, get up here! Okay, we're here. 12 to 50, we're here. We just had an explosion go on up here. I know there's fireworks or what, but they're starting to explode explosives. Fireworks material.
After attempting to dismantle the outermost perimeter, the rioters did everything in their power to storm past the police and into the Capitol. They coordinated moving metal barricades the police were using to maintain distance. Listen to the yelling of "pull them this way" as they grabbed the barriers and attacked officers trying to hold the line.
Pull them this way! Pull them forward!
At about 1:10 and 1:23 p.m., respectively, Capitol Police sent out the first evacuation alerts of the day, telling people to evacuate the Madison Building and the Cannon Building, respectively. Shortly after, at 1:45 p.m., Trump supporters surged past Capitol Police, protecting the Capitol's west steps, the side that is facing the White House. In another radio communication between Metropolitan Police officers, you can hear an officer declare that there is a riot at the Capitol at 1:49 p.m.
Cruiser 50, we're going to give riot warnings as soon as the apparatus is here. We're going to give riot warnings. We're going to try and get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
1349 hours, declaring it a riot.
The next video, as well as several videos that follow, have a model of the Capitol complex. The video is from the west front of the Capitol on the Senate side, the side facing the White House. Watch the red dot, which moves up the lower steps of the Capitol, indicating the approximate location of the rioters as they surge past the police. while the mob that Donald Trump sent to stop the certification came closer and closer to breaching the Capitol just one floor below where we are now, Vice President Pence continued to preside over the session in the Senate chamber above. At about 2:12 p.m., Secret Service quickly and suddenly evacuated Vice President Pence from the Senate floor. Here's the immediate reaction to that evacuation.
No audio. They just cut out. It looks like they and sometimes the
It seemed
Senate
like they just ushered Mike Pence out really quickly.
Yes, they did. That's exactly what just happened there. They ushered Mike Pence out. They moved him fast. I saw the motions too.
While the Vice President Pence was being evacuated from the Senate chamber, rioters were at that time breaking into the Capitol. This next video shows their approach and the initial breach of the Capitol complex. Remember to watch the red dot, which Broke is being tracking throughout this incident. Now we're going to show you, through security footage that has not been made public before, what that same breach looked like from the inside. Now, because this is security footage, there's no sound. Note, as the video begins, we are seeing the inside view as the mob approaches from outside and beats the windows and doors. You can see that the rioter first break the window with the wooden beam that you saw previously, and a lone police officer inside responds and begins to spray the first man who enters, but is quickly overwhelmed. I want you to pay attention to the first group of assailants as they break into the building. The second man through the window is wearing full tactical body armor and is carrying a baseball bat. Others are carrying riot shields. Among this group are members of the Proud Boys, some of whom, like Dominic Pizzola, who was recently indicted on federal conspiracy charges we will discuss later. Can watch where they're coming on our model as well. When I first saw this model that was created for this, I thought back to September 11th. I know a lot of you senators were here. Some of you might have been members on the House side. I was also here on September 11th. I was a staffer at that time. My office was on the west front of the Capitol. I worked in the Capitol, and I was on the House side. This year is 20 years since the attacks of September 11th. And almost every day, I remember that 44 Americans gave their lives to stop the plane that was headed to this Capitol building. I thank them every day for saving my life and the life of so many others. Those Americans sacrificed their lives for love of country, honor, duty, all the things that America means. The Capitol stands because of people like that. This Capitol that was conceived by our founding fathers, that was built by slaves, that remains through the sacrifice of service men and women around the world. And when I think of that, and I think of these insurgents, these images incited by our own President of the United States, attacking this Capitol to stop the certification of a presidential election, our democracy, our republic. At the same time that that breach on this Capitol building occurred, at approximately 2:13 p.m., just one floor up, while Senator Lankford was speaking on the Senate floor, Senator Grassley, who had taken over for Vice President Pence, called an unscheduled immediate recess of the Senate. A Senate aide approached Senator Lankford and informed him that the Capitol had been breached. Senator Grassley is immediately escorted out of the Senate chamber.
We'll pause.
Protesters are in the building.
Thank you.
Now, while this was going on, Officer Eugene Goodman responded to the initial breach. You all may have seen footage of Officer Goodman previously, but there's more to his heroic story. In this security footage, you can see Officer Goodman running to respond to the initial breach. Officer Goodman passes Senator Mitt Romney and directs him to turn around in order to get to safety. On the first floor, just beneath them, the mob had already started to search for the Senate chamber. Officer Goodman made his way down to the first floor, where he encountered the same insurrectionists we just saw watch breach the Capitol. In this video, we can see the rioters surge toward Officer Goodman. Recall that the rioters are in red and Officer Goodman in this model is in blue. Watch Officer Goodman, who backs up the stairs. Although they were shouting that they did not have any weapons, we know from the earlier video that that's not true. The second assailant through that breach was the one carrying a metal baseball bat. We know there were other weapons there that day. Did you hear the other shouts? We're here for you. He's one person, we're thousands. And where do they count the votes? They were coming at the urging of Donald Trump to keep Congress, a separate branch of government, from certifying the results of a presidential election. As the rioters reached the top of the stairs, they were within 100 feet of where the vice president was sheltering with his family. And they were just a feet away from one of the doors to this chamber, where many of you remained at that time. I also want to show you a different angle from the security footage of Officer Goodman's acts. This video is on the second floor of the Senate wing of the Capitol. The red dot, as you recall, represents the insurrectionists. The blue dot is Officer Goodman, who led the mob away from the chamber just minutes earlier. On the left-hand side of the video, just inside the hallway, is the door to the Senate chamber. And watch how Officer Goodman provokes the rioters and purposefully draws them away from the door to the Senate chamber and towards the other officers waiting down the hall. The rioter seen carrying a baseball bat in this video is the same one we saw moments ago breaching the window on the first floor. While all of this was going on, Vice President Pence was still in the room near the Senate chamber. It was not until 2:26 that he was evacuated to a secure location. This next security video shows that evacuation. His movements are depicted by the orange dot in our model. The red and blue dots represents the location where the mob and Officer Goodman were, and where Officer Goodman led the mob away from the chamber just moments ago. You can see Vice President Pence and his family quickly move down the stairs. The Vice President turns around briefly as he's headed down. As Pence was being evacuated, rioters started to spread throughout the Capitol. Those inside helped other rioters break in through doors in several locations around this entire building. And the mob was looking for Vice President Pence because of his patriotism, because the Vice President had refused to do what the President demanded and overturn the election results. During the assault on the Capitol, extremists reportedly coordinated online and discussed how they could hunt down the Vice President. Journalists in the Capitol reported they heard rioters say they were looking for Pence in order to execute him. Trump's supporters had erected a gallows on the lawn in front of the Capitol building. Another group of rioters chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," as they stood in the open door of the Capitol building. You can hear the security alarm from the door in the background, and you can hear the mob calling for the death of the Vice President of the United States. This wasn't an isolated area or incident where that was being told, where that was being said. It was going on everywhere. Here's another example of the crowd outside yelling, "Bring out Pence! Bring him out!"
Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence!
after President Trump had primed his followers for months and inflamed the rally-goers that morning, it is no wonder that the Vice President of the United States was the target of their wrath after Pence refused to overturn the election results. Listen to this man explain.
Well, Congress, cowards hid in their inside and were emergency escorted away because of fear of the people. Of course, they're cowards, can't face the people, can't do the right thing. Pence lied to us. He's a total treasonous pig, and his name will be mud forever. Now the real battle begins, and it looks like the American people are very pissed. So, good luck with that. Peace out.
Peace out. Several insurrectionists described what they had planned to do if they encountered the vice president or other lawmakers. One of them, Dominic Pizzola, also known as Spaz, is a member of the Proud Boys, as we discussed. Pizzola came to the Capitol on January 6 with deadly intentions. He commandeered a Capitol Police shield, used it to smash a glass window, entered the Capitol, and paved the way for dozens of insurrectionists. As you recall from an earlier video, Pizzola was one of the first wave of rioters to breach the building. On the left, you can see a screenshot from the video of the break-in we showed earlier. And on the right, you can see Pizzola in the mob chase Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman through the building. Pizzola is the man in the center of the photo with the gray beard. Pizzola has since been charged with 8 federal crimes for his conduct related to January 6. According to an FBI agent's affidavit submitted to the court, the group that was with him during the sack of the Capitol confirmed that they were out to murder, quote, anyone they got their hands on. Here's what the FBI said, and I quote, other members of the group talked about things they had done that day, and they said that anyone they got their hands on, they would have killed, including Nancy Pelosi, and that, quote, they would have killed Vice President Mike Pence if given the chance. They were talking about assassinating the Vice President of the United States. During the course of the attack, the Vice President never left the Capitol, remained locked down with his family inside the building. Remember that as you think about these images and the sounds of the attack. The Vice President, our second in command, was always at the center of it. Vice President Pence was threatened with death by the president's supporters because he rejected President Trump's demand that he overturn the election. The mob also went after Speaker of the House, who alongside the Vice President was presiding over the joint session of the certification in the House chamber. The chilling evidence shows that on January 6th, armed and organized insurrectionists trained their sights on Speaker Pelosi. They sought out the Speaker on the floor and in her office, publicly declared their intent to harm or kill her, ransacked her office, and terrorized her staff. And they did it because Donald Trump sent them on this mission. As the insurrectionists got closer, Capitol Police rushed the Speaker from the House floor at 2:15 p.m., mere minutes after the Capitol was first breached. They recognized immediately that she was in danger. The Speaker was not just rushed from the floor, the Capitol Police deemed the threat so dangerous that they evacuated her entirely from the Capitol complex, rushing her to a secure off-site location. The insurrectionist intent to murder the Speaker of the House is well documented in charging documents that are now available. We know from the rioters themselves that if they had found Speaker Pelosi, they would have killed her. I have already discussed Proud Boys member Dominic Pizzola, who has since been charged with 8 federal crimes for his conduct on January 6. As you will recall, according to the FBI agent's affidavit submitted to the court, the group he attacked the Capitol with confirmed that, quote, anyone they got their hands on, they would have killed, including Nancy Pelosi. William Calhoun, a lawyer from Georgia, also participated in the insurrection that day, and he too has been charged for his actions. This insurrectionist detailed his criminal activity at the Capitol online. Calhoun wrote about his involvement on his own Facebook page. Here's the post. Calhoun stated, quote, and get this, the first of us who got upstairs kicked in Nancy Pelosi's office door and pushed down the halls towards her inner sanctum. The mob howling with rage. Crazy Nancy probably would have been torn into little pieces, but she was nowhere to be seen. Crazy Nancy. That's Trump's nickname for the Speaker of the House. Then he explains that he and his group only abandoned their claim to the Speaker's office when, quote, a SWAT team showed up. He writes, quote, then a SWAT team showed and we retreated back to the rotunda and continued our hostile takeover of the Capitol building. Retreated, hostile takeover. He's using military terms for this attack. The mob continued to look for Speaker Pelosi throughout the time they occupied the Capitol, including invading her offices. Watch now how the mob searches for Speaker Pelosi's office, which is marked in red, and the House chamber itself.
Where are you, Nancy? We're looking for you. She's in jail. Nancy. Oh, Nancy. Nancy. Where are you, Nancy?
During the siege, the Speaker's staff took cover in her office, hiding in fear for their lives for hours, as rioters broke in and ransacked her office. As the rioters were breaking into the Capitol, her staff retreated into an interior room. 8 of them gathered in a conference room. About the same time, Capitol Police announced that Capitol had been breached. Speaker Pelosi's staff heeded the call to shelter in place. On our model, you can see the rioters in the rotunda in red and the Speaker's office again in orange. So this is a security video, so there is no sound. As you can see here, the staff moves from their offices through the halls and then enters a door on the right-hand side. That's the outer door of a conference room, which also has an inner door that they barricaded with furniture. The staff then hid under a conference room table in that inner room. This is the last staffer going in and then barricading themselves inside of the inner office. After just 7 minutes of them barricading themselves and the last staffer entering the door on the right, a group of rioters enter the hallway outside. And once inside, the rioters have free reign in the Speaker of the House's offices. In this security video, pay attention to the door that we saw those staffers leading into and going into. One of the rioters you can see is throwing his body against the door 3 times until he breaks open that outer door. Luckily, when faced with the inner door, he moves on. Another rioter later tried, unsuccessfully, to break through that inner door. At this point, the mob had already broken into the Speaker's formal conference room that is in the back of the hall at the top of the video. I want to play some audio we have of the Speaker's staff with the rioters at the door that day. You can hear the terror in their voice as they describe what's happening to them as they are barricaded in that conference room. Please listen carefully, because the staffer is whispering into a phone as he hides from the rioters that are outside the door.
Texting Mike that they're within our hallway. We need Capitol Police, I think, coming to the hallway. They're pounding on doors trying to find her.
You can hear the pounding in the background as that staffer is speaking. One of those staffers explained later that they could hear the mob going through her offices, breaking down the door and yelling, "Where are you, Nancy?" The mob also pillaged and vandalized the Speaker's office and documented their crimes on social media. They stole objects, desecrated the office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States. As you can see in these photos, rioters broke down a door. They also shattered a mirror. At 2:50 p.m., several rioters, including Richard Big O Barnett, entered Speaker Pelosi's office. The world is all now too familiar with the images from these slides. If you look closely, however, at the now infamous pictures of Barnett with his feet on the desk, you might see something that you didn't notice previously. Here's a better look. As this photo highlights, he's carrying a stun gun tucked into his waistband. The FBI identified the device as a 950,000-volt stun gun walking stick. The weapon could have caused serious pain and incapacitated anyone Barnett had used it against. Richard Barnett bragged about his actions. He was proud of the way he desecrated the Speaker of the House's office. He left a note: "We will not back down." Here's Barnett in his own words.
Office? How'd you get it? I didn't steal it. I bled on it because they were fucking macing me and I couldn't fucking see. And so I figured, well, I'm in her office. I got blood in her office. I'll put a quarter on her desk, even though she ain't fucking worth it. And I left her a note on her desk that says, "Nancy Big O is here, you bitch."
Trump's mob ransacked the Speaker of the House's office. They terrorized her staff. Again, that is a mob that was sent by the President of the United States to stop the certification of an election. The Vice President, the Speaker of the House, the first and second in line to the presidency, were performing their constitutional duties, presiding over the election certification, and they were put in danger because President Trump put his own desires, his own need for power over his duty to the Constitution and our democratic process. President Trump put a target on their backs, and his mob broke into the Capitol to hunt them down.
This man lady thing is way out of its mind, if it believes all that nonsense. Stupid. Let's get some shout outs in. Thank you so much, Ted, Big Red, Zedge Forever, or Edge Forever, Destiny Gal, Karen, ETN, for your donations and all your support. Thank you guys so much. And thank you, Quinata Patriot. Oh, thank you, Patriot, for joining the membership program, and welcome to the family. You're officially a hooligan. So I'm really interested to see when the other side gets to speak. Ooh, let me just smack my mic real quick. That's what she said. I'm tired of hearing the lies and the crying. I want to hear some facts.
What are you doing? We're surrounded. They breached the scaffold. Like nothing more, they have breached the scaffold. They're behind our lines.
Shortly after 2 p.m., the Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police were overwhelmed by President Trump's mob. Perimeters were broken. The Capitol had been breached. Those officers kept fighting back for hours and hours to hold the line. They fought to defend the Capitol building and all of us within it. But they weren't there just to protect us, and they did, and our staff, and the custodial staff, and all the people who work so hard in this building. They were there to protect the votes of the American people that were being counted that day. I will show you more later about what that day was like for those brave officers. But first, let's go back to what was happening where Manager Plaskett left off in the House chamber. Rioters who had entered the building through the Senate quickly spread out through the Capitol. Many headed towards the House and Senate chambers. After Speaker Pelosi was ushered out, Chairman McGovern was presiding in the House, attempting to keep the counting process going. On our phones, members were receiving security updates and watching social media to see the horror that was going on outside. We never thought it would make its way in. By 2:25 p.m., rioters who were already in the building opened the east side doors of the Capitol Rotunda to let more of the mob in. They quickly flooded through the doors, overwhelming the officers. This is new security footage of those doors. And as before, the mob is identified with the red dot on the model of the Capitol. If you look closely, you'll see the first person through the door is holding a Trump flag.
So they're not going to show how the doors became open. How do you break into a place when the doors open towards you? They're not going to show that. Okay. All right.
At the same time, just one floor below, the mob violently pushed through a line of Capitol police officers and overtook the area. We all know that area in the Capitol is the crypt. This is directly beneath the rotunda, at the very center of the Capitol. Inside the House chamber, a security officer suspended the floor debate to update members.
We had a disbursement of tear gas in the rotunda. Please be advised there are masks under your seats. Please grab a mask, place it in your lap, and be prepared to don your mask in the event that we get a breach.
We were told there were tear gas masks underneath our seats and be prepared to grab them. Determined to keep the count going, Chairman McGovern called the House back into session. But only 4 minutes later, at 2:30 p.m., the House abruptly recessed. A new security announcement was made.
Get down under your chairs if necessary, so we have folks entering the rotunda and coming down this way. So we'll update you as soon as we can, but just be prepared. Stay calm.
So do they normally have tear gas masks already under their seats? Is that normal procedure?
On just her 4th day on the job, walked to the front podium. Unannounced and amidst the chaos, she started to recite a prayer for peace. Uncertain what would happen next, I sent a text message to my wife. I love you and the babies. Please hug them for me. I imagine many of you sent a similar message. What we could not see from inside the chamber was that outside the mob was growing larger and larger and approaching our doors. But we could hear them. This security footage, which does not have sound, shows a close-up of Trump's mob as they move toward the 2nd floor of the House chamber to stop the counting of votes. In the back of the group, you see one individual carrying a Stop the Steal sign. They get within footsteps of the House door. The next video is the viewpoint of the insurrectionists. It begins with the mob amassing and then cuts ahead to show you their surge to the House door.
We want Trump! 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 We want Trump!
It's I told you they're going. They're going. Yeah, I would just stop. Dude, you're not helping. You're not helping. All right, you're gonna get me hurt and other people. Epstein! It's Epstein! It's the faggot Epstein! No violence! It's too late for that. They don't listen without that shit.
Those doors, to orient you at home, are the doors that the President of the United States walks through when he or she gives a State of the Union address. You may have heard one man yelled, "No violence," and another responded, "It's too late for that." They don't listen without that. They were there to stop the certification of the election. At this point inside the House chamber, we could now hear the pounding on the doors. At 2:35 p.m., members on the House floor were told an evacuation route was secured and it was time to leave. This video shows members of Congress exiting to the side of the podium where we would go through the House lobby and downstairs. Because of coronavirus restrictions, congressional members had been waiting in the gallery for their time to speak just one level above the House floor. Representatives, staff, journalists all took cover under their chairs, helped each other put on their gas masks, and held hands as rioters gathered outside. Here in this slide, you see Representative Jason Crow comforting our colleague, Representative Susan Wild. The rioters continued to surround the House chamber, flooding the halls and kicking on the doors as they passed them. This security video shows Ashley Babbitt, followed by others in the mob, turning the corner toward the House lobby doors where the members were leaving.
If they show her get shot again, I'll have to black screen it. I can't show any pew pew sticks. Stupid YouTube stuff.
Chairman McGovern was one of the last members to leave the floor. As he left through the House lobby just after 2:40 p.m., he was spotted by the mob. Minutes later, at 2:44 p.m., Ashley Babbitt attempted to climb through a shattered window into the House lobby. To protect the members in the lobby, an officer discharged his weapon, and she was killed. I want to warn everyone that the next video, which shows her death, is graphic. Inside the chamber, representatives, staff, and journalists remain trapped in the gallery, one floor above the House floor, and heard the gunshot. My colleague, Representative Dan Kildee, produced this recording.
Take your pins off!
Yeah. The fuck?
Take your pins off!
Pins off!
Out of fear that they'd be seen or taken by the mob, my colleagues were telling each other to take off their congressional pins.
That's so stupid to me.
The background of these videos was the sound of the gas masks. It was not until approximately 2:50 p.m., about 6 minutes after the shooting, downstairs, remaining members, staff, and journalists in the gallery were finally able to flee. In this security footage video, you can see them exiting. Many members are still wearing their gas masks. They walk just feet away from where Capitol Police are holding an insurrectionist at gunpoint. Just minutes earlier, that insurrectionist had tried to open the gallery door and thankfully was stopped by a tactical team.
They got pew-pews on the screen. I can't show it.
Although members were now being moved to another location, the mob continued to fight, to stop the count, to find the members, to engage with the police. The building was not yet secure. This security video from 2:56 p.m. shows the mob in the House of Representatives wing on the second floor of the Capitol. Insurrectionists who are still inside the building are fighting with the police, who are overwhelmed and trying to get them out. Throughout this presentation, we have been very careful to not share where members of Congress were taken on the paths they followed to get out and off the floors. But that very issue was under discussion by the insurrectionists themselves. One example comes from an FBI affidavit, which stated that a leader of a militia group known as the Oath Keepers received messages while he was at the Capitol. The leader was given directions to where representatives were thought to be sheltering and instructions to, quote, turn on gas, seal them in. And as you know, the threat to the Senate was no less than that of the members of the House. the mob approached the Senate with the same purpose, fulfilling President Trump's goal of stopping the count, delaying the certification of the Electoral College votes of the American people. As you heard from Manager Plaskett, Vice President Pence was moved away from the area near the Senate chamber around 2:25 p.m. By that time, rioters had breached several areas close to this chamber, and they were flooding the hallways just outside and nearby. The Senate chamber was not evacuated until 2:30 p.m. The mob had been in the building for more than 15 minutes. This new security footage of the senators and staff leaving the chamber will be displayed on the screens. It is silent.
Thank you, Sherry, for your donation and your support and reminding me to put my glasses back on. Thank you so much.
But quick-thinking Senate floor staff grabbed and protected the electoral ballots that the mob was after. Those of you who were here that day will recall that once you left the Senate floor, you moved through a hallway to get to safety. That hallway was near where Officer Goodman had encountered a mob and led them upstairs and away from the Senate chamber. You know how close you came to the mob. Some of you, I understand, could hear them, but most of the public does not know how close these rioters came to you. As you were moving through that hallway, I paced it off. You were just 58 steps away from where the mob was amassing and where police were rushing to stop them. They were yelling. In this security video, you can see how the Capitol Police created a line and blocked the hallway with their bodies to prevent rioters at the end of the hall from reaching you and your staff.
Hey, thank you so much, Jersey Devil, for joining the membership program, and welcome to the family. You're officially a hooligan.
Because this is security footage that you have not seen before, I want to play it again. The top of the screen is the other end of that hallway where the mob has amassed and the officers are rushing to protect you.
Play it again for dramatic effect.
Additional security footage shows how Leader Schumer and the members of his protective detail had a near miss with the mob. They came within just yards of rioters and had to turn around. Here in this new video, you see Leader Schumer walking up a ramp. going up the ramp with his detail. He'll soon go out of view. Seconds later, they return and run back down the hallway, and officers immediately shut the door and use their bodies to keep them safe. At 2:45 p.m., shortly after senators were ushered to safety from the Senate floor, insurrectionists reached this Senate gallery. The following video was filmed by a New Yorker reporter.
Where the fuck are they?
Minutes later, the insurrectionists invaded and desecrated the Senate floor. These vandals shouted and rifled through the desks in this room. They took pictures of documents and of themselves, celebrating that they had taken over the floor and stopped the counting of Electoral College votes.
Let me just get a snap of that.
Yeah, I took a picture.
Hey, how do y'all get down there? Go down the stairs.
And look here, look.
Ted Cruz's objection to the Arizona.
His objection. He was going to sell us out all along. Really? Look. Objection to counting electoral votes of the state of Arizona. I get a photo of that. Wait, no, that's. Oh, no, that's okay. All right.
He's with us. He's with us. There's gotta be something here we can fucking use against these scumbags.
Quit acting a fool, man!
America's a republic. Oh no, this is good stuff.
Hey! Quit acting a fool!
Larry Brock, who was arrested for his role in the insurrection, was photographed on the Senate floor wearing a helmet, tactical gear, and carrying flex cuffs. This man, also in the Senate gallery, is Eric Munchell. Like Brock, he was dressed in what appears to be tactical gear.
How did they figure out who that guy is?
If the doors to this chamber had been breached just minutes earlier, imagine what they could have done with those cuffs. After insurrectionists occupied the Capitol and stopped the joint session from counting the votes, the Capitol was in lockdown for 5 hours. As long as it took to get back to the Capitol, to get back to the certification of the election, it could have been so much longer. Or we might not been able to have resumed at all. As horrific as it was, 140 officers injured, 3 officers who ultimately lost their lives. We all know that awful day could have been so much worse. The only reason it was not was because of the extraordinary bravery of the men and women of the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Departments. For hours and hours, these insurrectionists were in hand-to-hand combat with these brave men and women. Like some of you, I come from a law enforcement family. My dad was a cop. My 2 brothers, my little brothers, are cops who walk the beat today. I'm proud of them. And like in every law enforcement family, when we hang up the phone, we don't only say, "I love you," we say, "Be safe." So let's focus now on the attack and what it was like for the officers defending the Capitol that day. And again, I want to warn you that the following audio and videos are graphic and are unsettling. But it's important that we understand the extent of what occurred. Here's an audio recording from the radio traffic of the DC Metropolitan Police Department describing the violence.
Your county were still taking rocks, bottles, and pieces of flag and metal poles. The crowd is using munitions against us. They have bear spray in the crowd. Bear spray in the crowd. DSO, I need a re-up. I need a re-up up here.
You hear the officer describe,
Was that the graphic part?
the rioters, are using munitions against us. This video shows how the sprays that were described were used against the officers. In a separate Metropolitan Police Department radio traffic recording, you can hear an officer when he realizes that the insurrectionists had overtaken the police line.
We lost the line. We lost the line. All MPD, pull back. All MPD, pull back up to the upper deck. All MPD, pull back to the upper deck. ASAP. All MPD, come back to the upper deck. Upper deck. Cruiser 50 was blanked. 1033. I repeat, 1033, west front of the Capitol. We've been blanked and we've lost the line.
Why is there nothing else in the audio? Is he not surrounded by protesters, rioters, whatever they want to call them? That doesn't make sense. The audio doesn't make any sense.
Hours after members of the House and Senate had left this area, on the west front of the building, the mob continued to grow, continued to beat the officers as they tried to get in. In this new security video, you can see the mob attacking officers with a crutch, a hockey stick, a bullhorn, and a Trump flag. I want to show you that same attack from the officer's perspective from his body camera footage. This body camera footage is from 4:27 p.m., over 2 hours from when the Capitol was first breached. The attack on police that afternoon was constant. Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone, a 20-year police veteran with 4 daughters, was part of a line of officers protecting the Capitol. He was one of 3 officers that the mob dragged down the stairs. When they dragged him, they stole his badge, his radio, his ammunition magazine, and they tased him, triggering a heart attack. Here he describes his experience.
Looked like a medieval battle scene. You know, some of the most brutal combat I've ever encountered. At one point I got tased. People were yelling out, we got one, we got one.
Officer Christina Lowry, who regularly serves in MPD's Narcotics and Specialized Investigation Division, also protected the front Capitol entrance. Here's her experience.
I mean, I can't say enough about the officers that were there, the officers that were on the front line. And when I say the front line, I mean literally officers that were in a line, stopping these people that were beating them with metal poles. They were spraying them with bear mace. I mean, they did everything in their power to not let those people in. And this was going on for hours.
Around 4:30 p.m., hours into the Capitol riots, Officer Daniel Hodges was protecting a West Side Capitol entrance when rioters who were trying to stop the certification trapped him between two doors. When Officer Hodges was interviewed later, this is how he described what was happening.
They threw down a huge metal object that hit me in the head. I was also knocked down. The medical mask I was wearing at the time got pulled up over my eyes, so I was on the ground and blinded, and they started just attacking me from all sides.
Rioters crushed Officer Hodges. He was wedged in the doorway, blood dripping from his mouth. He was struggling to breathe, all while the insurrectionists hit him. Officer Hodges' experience reminds you of what he and many other officers experienced that day, what they went through. We're also reminded of the 3 officers who lost their lives. Capitol Hill police officers Sicknick, Liebengood, and Metropolitan Police Officer Smith. In many law enforcement families, we pray for our loved ones, and we know the scripture of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. I'm sorry I have to show you the next video, but in it you will see how blessed we were that on that hellish day we had a peacemaker like Officer Hodges, protecting our lives, our staff's lives, this Capitol, and the certification process. May we do all we can in this chamber to make sure that never happens again.
Oh yeah, we're being shadow banned right now. They took me off the list. If you guys haven't hit that like button, please take a second to hit that like button. Just a moment.
The Senate will stand in recess.
Oh, I guess they're going to go on recess until 6:15. All right. Well, we're not going to sit here for that long. So I guess it doesn't matter. We're being shadow banned. Screw them. We're going to shut this live down, and then when they come back from their recess, we will go live again. So I wish they would let the other side speak. I don't know if they're just going to let these people speak for the whole 8 hours, and then tomorrow they're going to let the other side speak. I'm not sure exactly what the plan is here. I didn't think we were going to go the whole days with lies and cries, but that's what it's looking like. That is what it's looking like. So we're going to shut this down, and we will go live when they come back from their recess. Thank you guys for being here. Big shout out to everyone that made donations, joined the membership program, or purchased any merch. I really appreciate you guys. You guys are what's keeping the channel going, and you're why I can do this every day. So thank you so much. Yeah, Steve Pence, I know I'm being shadow banned right now. I don't know if it's something that was on the screen or something I said. I don't know. We're being shadow banned, but it doesn't matter because we're going to shut it down for 45 minutes, I think it is. Till 6:15. It's almost 5:30 right now, Eastern time. Yeah. Either way, thank you guys for being here. I know it's insane to sit here and watch these liars, but it's important. It's important that we do. So, yeah. I don't know. You know, like I'm saying, I don't know if we're going to hear the other side speak today or not, or if it's just going to be more lies and cries for the rest of the day. Hopefully that means tomorrow it'll all be facts, which would be nice, but you never know. You never know how it's going to go. Either way, we're going to shut this down. We will be live again in 45 minutes. So thank you guys for being here. If you're new here, please subscribe. Hit the bell icon and join the Discord. That way you never miss a notification whenever we go live. And, whoa. Yeah. So thank you guys for being here. Until we come back, stand tall, shine bright. That's a wrap.